Hi, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I am 𝗗𝗂𝗃𝗁, and welcome to Digital Dialogue. We are talking about human-centric enablement in the AI era. So we're going to be getting into some good stuff today. We know AI is affecting everything in our world. And one of the things that I think is one of the most challenging pieces of that is how change affects people. So we're going to focus today on three key areas around that. First being leadership and how leaders need to reshape their organizations and how they do that to fit in this AI era. We're going to be talking about how they bring their teams along and help teams be adaptable as we are disrupted. And also, and I would say probably most importantly, we're going to talk about the customer. How do we keep customer trust through all of this? So welcome to the show. We have some housekeeping to do with you. So before we really get started, just note that there's a chat. So if you have comments and questions, please put those in the chat and we'll try to weave all of that in there. So again, 𝗗𝗂𝗃𝗁, and I am a former CIO, for those of you that don't know me, Chief Experience Officer more recently, and my focus is all around the human-centric side of change management and how we help cultures be adaptable so that we are continuing to flex as disruption happens and also put our businesses in a great place to be market ready. With me today, I have a great panel, so you're not going to be stuck listening to me this whole time. So let's get them on there. First, we have 𝗵𝗂 Sanger, who's going to be joining us. 𝗵𝗂, welcome to our discussion today. 𝗵𝗂 is a transformational strategist. She's got deep expertise in professional services, so she's a great person to be on here as we chat about transformation. And also, let's bring on 𝗚𝗂𝗲𝘀.
Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning. Nice to have you on the show. 𝗚𝗂𝗲 is CEO of Mend and has a deep set of experience in digital and scaling digital health ventures. I haven't said that very well, have I?
You did well.
Tell me better. Tell me better.
Yeah, digital health is good.
Perfect. And then, of course, we've got Val Thomas, last but not least, to join us today. Val, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Val and I have known each other for a good long time. And Val's a CIO and a transformation expert. He has expertise in strategy, AI in particular, and governance. And I think we're going to be hitting on that quite a bit today as we kind of go through our program. So welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here. I have to say to all of you, again, happy St. Patrick's Day. I am currently in Thailand, as some of you know. I travel and live around the world quite a bit. So I'm outside of the States often. So I know for you guys on the East Coast and all across the US, it's a little bit earlier in the morning. I've had my day here. And since it is St. Patrick's Day, I was looking for St. Patrick's Day in Thailand. They don't really do that here. Don't do that. But I did find two pubs, which won't surprise most of you that know me pretty well. I did find two Irish pubs, and I've got my shamrock on, and I've got my crazy hat to celebrate. I didn't, I'm only here with my luggage, so I don't have anything green. But anyway, that's my kind of throw in on St. Patrick's Day. So get to see me in a silly hat. Anyway, on to more serious subjects. Let's really get down into the conversation. You guys ready?
We're ready.
Let's go.
Ready, let's go. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about leadership and really how leadership has to sort of reshape both themselves and their organizations and their teams as we're living through the world of disruptive AI. So I've got a few questions for you guys. 𝗵𝗂, I'm going to kick off with you. So we're focused on leadership right now. Mm-hmm. So thinking about that, what behaviors do leaders most display or what do they do most effectively to help organizations sort of reorganize in this AI disruptive time? What are you seeing?
So what we see is leaders who are very good at this first need to almost be looking around corners or sort of thinking of where the business needs to go and how AI can enable that. Once they do that, then they need to start communicating that really effectively. Because the thing you find is that when people get a little nervous about what AI is going to do, the biggest thing is they want to know that the leader knows why they're doing this, what needs to be done, and then he or she communicates it effectively and consistently. So in fact, that's what the leader needs to do, set the tone at the top. That's a really good way of making it and saying, and almost then communicating, saying, what does this mean for you? So that becomes incredibly important.
Yeah, the what's in it for me. We can't forget that. So important, so important. So Val, I'm going to flip this a little bit with you. Let's talk about governance. From a governance standpoint, particularly with boards and the executive suite, how can they oversee AI adoption to make sure that it strengthens their organization and not undermine the culture?
So there's two parts to this, I think, but together boards and senior leadership need to start with the organization's values. Everything kind of comes back to that. But as terms of AI and AI governance, you create that AI governance, protect the culture by embedding those values at the design stage, not as a compliance exercise after the fact, which often comes up. So what's culture? Culture is built through repeated decisions and actions. It's a simple example. When the leader repeatedly asks, what can we learn instead of who's to blame? The team learns from that. They stop fearing their mistakes. That repetition is important to remember because AI systems make decisions at a scale and consistency no human team ever could, right? That's why we're doing this. That can make a very powerful culture shaping force for better or worse. And if you treat AI as an efficiency tool, you might discover that sometimes too late, it was quietly shaping the culture. So what do we do, right? So boards have three responsibilities here. They need to require cultural impact assessments alongside of ROI analysis, all right, particularly when AI is replacing decisions. You need to make sure HR has a genuine seat at the table on AI strategy, not just technology leaders. Yeah, I'm a technology leader, but I'm saying invite HR there, all right? And you need to make sure culture and values, I like the word values, that alignment is a standing conversation separate from the risk management. That's what the board needs to push down at their level. For executives, decide what decisions should stay human and which ones the AI can actually strengthen. Not because the automation is impossible, because sometimes the act of a human making a judgment call matters to the people affected by it. Okay, so there's a lot of different examples I give here. I'll try to be brief, but internally, conversations covering discipline, ethical exceptions, or moments when an employee really needs to feel heard. That's something that you might not want to put AI on. Externally, think about customer complaint resolution versus claims processing. A well-designed AI can route and resolve complaints very fast, but a poorly designed one signals to customers that they don't matter. That's extremely important to your culture. In claims processing, the other might be, the speed and accuracy actually reinforce a culture of fairness. So those types of things you need to balance about where you're putting your AI. But onboarding flows, that's really important because the first impression a customer or employee gets is of your organization. And now it's being shaped by an AI algorithm. So when that's AI algorithms designed around the company values that you actually want to express, it can deliver those values very consistently. All right. So these are things that AI is good at: speed, consistent. The risk, though, around that is when it's designed around pure efficiency and the human touch disappears, that's when you lose your culture. Sum it all up, organizations that embed their values into AI design can shape their culture intentionally and consistently. Those that don't might find the algorithm shaped it for them.
So I just want to clarify the statement that you made there, that values need to be sort of built in at the design stage. Can you give me an example of what that means? Like, what does that look like?
I think the organization values need to be designed at every single choice here. So Someone once told me if you're looking at whether or not we should do something, well, does it meet the values? All right, is it jive with our values? If we should, then we should do it. So, are we looking at something for efficiency's sake, or are we looking at something to enhance our customer experience, to become the number one word on everybody's lips? Does it enhance that? If it does enhance that, and it's just not a efficiency thing to cut some headcount or make something run a little bit faster, then why are we doing it? All right, so then turning around and creating the AI governance around to make sure that it's enhancing these 4 values that our company stands for, that's kind of what's important, I think, at that point. And thinking about this as you're putting your AI systems into place. And don't get me wrong, we're not talking about that simple little thing that automates this one little thing to process invoices. We're talking about those human-facing type things that are affecting our customers and affecting our employees. And that is where the culture part comes into play.
Well, this is music to my ears, as you well know. I mean, looking at it from the customer's perspective, of course. And actually, I'm going to go to you, Isaiah, just sort of topically on this one. As a CIO of a company, I'm just curious how you feel about this. I have seen situations where things like culture sounds or seems like a fluffy thing or a soft skill or, not as valuable to a CEO as, really focusing on sales and the pipeline and all of that. How do you differentiate that, in your mind, the importance of putting investment in culture into your organization?
Yeah, I think those things don't matter to the wrong CEO. I think the right CEO, they matter a lot. So, kind of going back to the values question, I think clarity and tone on this topic, it's vital that it come from the top. I've been very vocal on this issue for many, many, many years, that I believe AI needs to always be an enabler and not a displacer. And we need to embed that deeply into the architecture of how we're thinking about this technology at an industry level, at a systemic level, versus just an organizational level. So at an organizational level, clearing clarity is first taking that hard stance that our values dictate that we place humans first, and we're looking at technology to enable and make you more efficient and more effective at your job, not to take your job away. And then to dispel some of the incredible hyperbole and fear that's out there. We've been through major technological disruptions before. There have been major periods from steam to industrial automobiles and mass production to, the internet. And then we've heard this hysteria before. And guess what? Humanity found its way through. We had more jobs, we had more productivity, et cetera. Now, this is a scary disruption. It's a disruption that's a little different than what we've experienced before. And undoubtedly, there will be dislocation. But I think a narrative from the top that helps to reduce some of that fear, that one, we're using this technology to enable you to be more effective, and two, that this is not something that is going to fundamentally change society so much that all of us will be unemployed at some point. I personally think that's hyperbole. AI is not going to grow arms and legs anytime soon. Yes, there will be change. So as far as our organization, how we've done this, we're in healthcare. Healthcare, the human touch is vitally important. We will never displace our clinicians. We always celebrate our clinicians in the organization, and the AI is there as a tool to help them deliver care better. And so clearly articulating to our clinicians what that means. So it means at 2 a.m. when you're sleeping, some widget can actually do some work on your behalf. It means all those tedious administrative things you were doing no longer need to be done by you. They can be done by this tool. And start referring to it as our technology rather than AI, because that word has become something that it stimulates our amygdala with fear. We no longer need to fear it. We need to understand it and have a tone from the top that makes us understand that this is something that can all make us more effective.
Can I add to what Isaiah just said? Because the thing that any technology is going to do is what we fundamentally do is not going to change. So like if I'm doing consulting, I would still do that. The technology would enable me to do it better or faster. If you're a lawyer, you're going to still provide legal advice, but now you're just going to be able to do some of the more repetitive tasks more effectively. And the same thing what Isaiah was saying about healthcare, right? That you still need the healthcare the people who provide the care. But that's what it starts almost distilling down, where the human really adds value, and that's not going away. Because I think, in fact, in this age of technology, the human interaction, the human touch, human connection has actually become even more important. And technology can just enable us to do it better. And I think that's what leadership needs to emphasize. It shouldn't be like, now it's going to take away your job, so now you train it and you're no longer going to be needed. And there is so much hype. So I also like what you said, Isaiah, about the fact that it sort of triggers something in the brain, because you can see that level of fear. And like literally every article you read on LinkedIn is now like, oh my God, this is what this is going to do. And you're like, not really. Why are we doing this and creating so much fear around it?
So I'm going to use that as a segue into kind of moving away from leadership for a minute. Let's talk about the actual teams, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that leadership has to embrace things in a different way, but it's imperative that we're bringing our teams along for the ride. So I'm going to come back to you real quick, and I'm looking for the actual how-to in this question. I'm just curious kind of what strategies you have found that actually has helped your teams, embrace disruption. So AI clearly is a disruption. What strategies or tactics are you using to help your teams feel like they are part of this, they're embraced it, it's not something that's a threat to them, but it's actually something that they're excited and energized to kind of move forward with? How have you done that?
Yeah, well, the first thing is setting the tone. That this is here to enable and make us more efficient and faster and better, and not to displace anybody. The second is, we're a very collaborative, co-design type of a philosophy in the organization. So we're building things together, and a lot of disparate voices. We have in design sessions where we're talking about technology roadmaps. We have clinical leadership there, we have tech leadership there, we have business, we have marketing. We're getting vast number of perspectives on where we need to be and where we need to go, and that co-ownership, I think, does remarkable things in terms of not only getting people excited, but also dissipating some of that weird fear and worry, because they see where it's headed, they see where it's going, and they see where the organization is going. And we very intentionally been, although there is tremendous pressure to become called an AI organization for everybody, we've been cautious about it. We're using the tools that we think makes the most sense to us without just putting AI on our website so that we can say we're an AI organization. So we're taking measured steps. And I think all of those factors, setting the tone at the top, being very collaborative and inclusive, and then taking measured steps so that this is not disrupting the organization, not necessarily, but actually creating real efficiencies. All those things get people comfortable.
Awesome. Val, I want to pull you into this conversation because you and I had a chat last week, and I'd like to talk about it. So we were talking about some of your experiences rolling out AI in an organization you were with. I believe it was a academic organization. And from what I'm remembering, and you can correct me if I've got your story all wrong here, but what I took from you was that, yes, cost efficiencies were part of the AI implementation, but that really wasn't the crux of it. It was more around retaining students and enhancing their graduation process and making sure that they were able to complete the program. So I think I got that one right. But what I pulled from the conversation last week is that your initiative wasn't so much around laying people off and taking jobs away. What obstacles you were facing were more around maybe skepticism and not really caring about being. Can you describe the story, because it was a great story, and I'm just mucking.
Sure. At the end of the day, for anything, right? So yeah, with the initial thing was a Lincoln tutor that was being put in place, which would help students, go through their tests and things like that, and help them do that. And I'm sure that's still going on there at this point. But so it wasn't trying to replace anybody anyway, but help our customer. But where the inertia, the skepticism, sometimes those are harder change management problems than fear of a job loss, because fear of a job loss is at least a clear emotion you can address directly. All right, their initial skepticism more diffuse. but they're pretty rational responses to past experiences. If you think about it, most employees have lived through these technology rollouts that were promised as enablers and delivered as burdens. All right, so that history is sitting there every time you introduce something new, whether it be AI or something else. You don't acknowledge it, you're fighting it invisibly. So the starting point on all this stuff is credibility, not necessarily communication blast. Show me, don't tell me. All right, that's the simplest thing here. That means, finding people closest to the actual work, identifying the friction they deal with, and show how AI is removing that friction to free them up for other things. But here's the thing about skeptics. They can be your most valuable asset if you engage them correctly. Bring them into design and testing processes. It improves the tool because they know where the edges are and they're not afraid to speak up. And it converts your most ardent resistors into advocates. That's worth more than any top-down communication plan. Inertia, a little bit different, not really about distrust. It's about activation energy. Sorry, didn't make that word up, but whatever you want to call that. People have workflows that work well enough. I got a cartoon with a person. I got to find it someplace. I lost it. It's a person chopping down a tree with an axe. Okay. There's another person standing behind him. He's trying to hand him a chainsaw. But the person with the axe is yelling at the guy saying, "See, can't you see I'm busy?" And so so what do you do there? You're the one with the chainsaw trying to help this person, but they know how to use that axe so well. It's what they do day in, day out. So why don't you stand next to him and start cutting down another tree with the chainsaw and show up? All right. I guarantee you'll get his attention. And then once they learn how to use that chainsaw, they'll never go back to the axe. All right. So the leadership posture that works here best is patient persistence without any pressure. If you try to mandate adoption, that kills the psychological safety you need for any kind of honest feedback. But you can't let inertia win by default either. If the value is real, tangible enough, you can show it, and the barrier to entry is low enough, which AI should do for us, all right, then adoption of this just becomes a path of least resistance.
Well, I really like something you said there, and it actually ties with what Isaiah had said a few minutes ago, and it's getting specifically the skeptic. So if you've got somebody who's almost resisting in whatever form, whatever emotion that may be, but to actually put them in as part of the development, if you will, process, whatever development means, whether it's creating the tool, implementing the tool,
beta tester, whatever it might be, this works. Every time you can get it done, it works. And it just, oh, so-and-so likes it. That's interesting.
Great. And I think it aligns, like I said, with Isaiah and how he's kind of managing his teams. Nita, I want to pull you in.
Sure.
I know you are, working with leaders all of the time and kind of helping coach them specific to activating teams to be prepared for this disruption. What are you telling your, the people that you're working with? How do they do that? How does a leader activate his or her team to be open?
So it actually sort of follows up from what Isaiah and Val said. What actually you need to do is first you need to sort of bring them along on the change journey and get them involved, bring them along and sort of say, okay, what are the pain points you're experiencing in the work that you're doing? How can the technology actually help you? So then they become part of co-creating the solution. And then as you're doing it, you sort of help test it out with them and say, hey, does this work? If it's something that's meant for them internally. Also, a lot of times your employees are closest to your customers as well. Then they're in a position to tell you what the customers, where are their pain points. So at this point, then they then become the best people to say, okay, so now let's see what can we do differently? What can we be changing? And then they start testing out the product for you. And they'd be like, no, I need this to look slightly different, or here's how it would work better for me. And then once they do that and start using it, they actually become your best champions because they take ownership of it. They feel like they've been involved in it. They feel that ownership. And then they would be like, they will go tell others and say, hey, this was the best thing. There's a little bit of Val, what you were saying. Then they are going to want to use it. And they'll tell everybody, hey, I gave this idea and this is how it came about. So a good leader actually does that. And not everybody can be involved in the development. Then make sure you bring people along on what's called like the change journey. And that's a consultant term, which means tell them how this is going and what this would mean for them, how this would change their work. So there is that communication piece, but the more you get them involved and the earlier you get them involved. And the critics are actually the ones who are going to tell you some of the issues that people are facing, but not everybody has the courage to come out and say that. That's where you need to sort of say, okay, what exactly are they telling me? What's the underlying issue? Is it fear? Are they afraid they'll lose their jobs? And then you point out to them what this would help them do. Maybe it could free up their time to do more value-added activities. So the leader has to listen, or the leaders have to listen to what they're saying, and then sometimes what is not being said. So people will tell you they'll act from anger, but understand the fear behind that's causing it. So that's what a good leader needs to do to sort of bring the teams along.
So I want to just take sort of a sidestep on this whole topic with the team piece of this and talk about adaptability. And I'm going to ask each of you for one specific tangible tip on how do you help build adaptability into your organizational culture. I mean, we could go on this one for hours. But unfortunately, we can't do that today. So I'm looking for one thing that you can think of. I know I'm just getting you guys right on the spot on this one.
So
If people,
after Val,
go ahead, Nina. No, ladies first, please.
So I would say create a safety where people can provide that kind of a thing, and then there's almost like create, like, you need to have a place where they can actually test out things or try out things without fear of failure. Like, because in a lot of the industries we are in, like, there's a very high penalty if you fail, but you almost need to create a sandbox where they have the ability to come and play. That becomes incredibly important. So then people are not afraid. Or you create an environment where they can give ideas, and then they're not going to be penalized for it if they try them out and they fail. Because that's what, when you try to innovate and change something, that's what it's about. Fail fast and then turn around. And some of the most successful companies, you've heard that at Google and others, which give their people time to actually go out and try and do things differently. And some of their best products and solutions have come out of that. So you need to create that environment. That becomes incredibly important. So people know it's okay for me to say stuff that's different and try out stuff different and even fail.
That's great advice. Val, what were you going to say?
I'm going to give you 1.5 because I think part of this is culture. All right. So it's important to normalize learning out there in public. And what do I mean? I mean, when leaders of the company visibly experiment, fail, adjust, and then share what they learned, it signals that uncertainty is safe. Okay. If you go into an all hands meeting and all it's told there are success stories, you're quietly teaching people that problems are shameful. All right. You want to celebrate the early flags that prevented a bigger failure. But we've been in those meetings before where everything is good news. Okay. So that's part of it. But, one tip, I got a million of them, but I think one of the things to do is give people genuine autonomy over their small decisions. Adaptability around this, that atrophies when every single change requires senior approval. This also helps in leadership. If people don't have practice making these low stakes judgment calls about whatever it might be, they won't be ready for the higher ones later on. Organizations that only ask people to adapt during crises are actually just asking them to sprint without ever having jogged first. So you got to give them the experience, and that builds leaders.
Awesome. Isaiah, what you got?
Look, I think there is also the reality that every employee has a different profile and different DNA, and there are those that are more comfortable in an environment where there is a lot of change, and adaptability is one of their core strengths and traits, and there are others who aren't. And I think calibrating that in one's organization where change is happening and being very deliberate about who you situate in that particular environment is probably also a tactical thing that can be done, because some people like routine and predictability and structure, and that's where they thrive, and others like a little bit of chaos and change and a rapid pace. So I think being very thoughtful and mindful about who you're placing in the way of the train, so to speak, with AI is also intentional design.
Yeah, when I was very early in my career, it just came as a shock to me that not everyone thinks the same way I do. Right. So I had to learn that as a leader that, how I might react to something is not necessarily how everybody else in front of me. And so really getting into the psyche of your team and being supportive in what works well for them. Again, it goes back to how do you make them successful? I think that's just the key. We want success here. How do we make each other successful?
Yeah, I mean, we're still very much a startup environment, and we had to matriculate, folks out of the organization just because it wasn't the right culture and environment for them to thrive in, and that's okay. And so it's really being intentional about and mindful about what kind of environment you're pulling an employee into, and does it fit and resonate with kind of who they are and where they want to be at this point in their career. Because not every role is. I've seen situations where an A player is performing at a C or D level in a role, and you get them into the right role and they're back to being an A player. So, we all have to be mindful of that.
Great advice. So I'm going to take us to sort of the third kind of leg in the stool here, which is the customer side of things, and really how we strengthen customer trust through our AI journey. Val, I'm going to kick this off with you. Again, going back to your kind of governance side of what you do, how do you, as an organization, ensure transparency and ethical use of AI in order to maintain customer confidence?
Customer confidence. Okay, so that's built on a lot of things, right? It's trust in the organization. In case of AI, I think we could sum it up, or I'm not going to say sum it up, but there's a belief that the organization is using AI in their interest, not just its own interest. Okay, so you need transparency to make that belief credible, but it has to be real, not lip service. How many organizations do we know that have disclosure language buried somewhere in terms of service? Okay, that's legal cover, not transparency. Real transparency means the customers understand in plain terms when AI is involved in decisions that affect them, what factors shape them, and how to challenge them if something's wrong. So from a governance standpoint, a few things matter. First, what's our internal value statement, back to values, about how we use AI, and how does that track to our company values? All right, so we have an internal value statement, about AI value statement, and our company values. All right, we use AI responsibly. It's a meaningless statement. Rather, we will not use AI to make final decisions on credit, claims, or customer disputes without human review. That's a commitment. That's a commitment that you, your customer, your frontline organization can all turn around and measure and communicate with confidence. All right. So second, build explainability in the system design. If your team can't explain in plain language why the AI produced a particular outcome, your customers certainly can't understand it, and your frontline employees can't defend it. I was sitting there arguing with an AI, to be not named, that it was 2026. It thought it was 2025 because it was looking at all the stuff inside the documents I had sent it up for some contract reviews, and it was convinced it was 2025. This was 2 weeks ago. All right. If I hadn't caught that, it would have gone on. It changed the whole nature of the thing. But so you've got to check these things. You got to explain. It needed to explain to me, and it did explain to me what happened there. Okay. And so that brings us to the third one: audit your AI outcomes. All right. There's a lot of tools you can help with. Some of them AI tools, but AI systems can produce unfair results without anyone intending them to. All right. And they inherit the biases presented in the data, which is exactly what this system did at that time. Regular third-party audits or internal audits with results that are at least partially shared externally with your customer, they signal that accountability that's genuine rather than self-policing. Talking transparency. I'll try to sum this up, but make the feed path and escalation paths visible and easy. Customers who think they were treated unfairly by automated decision need a clear path to human resolution. All right. If you don't have that, confidence collapses quickly. Connect this all back to your organizational values. And the governance principle underneath all of that is that ethical AI use isn't a compliance function, it's a trust function. All right, if that makes sense. Trust, once broken, is really hard to rebuild.
Well, that's great. Isaiah, I'm just going to pick on you if you don't mind, especially from your perspective. I mean, how do you see governance of AI? How do you ensure that? I mean, you're dealing with patients, yes. I mean, you've got a really important audience, and I would think this is a critical element for you.
Yeah, look, I think every organization needs an AI ethics framework. I've kind of loosely articulated that in an article I'd written now a number of years ago. But while we haven't codified that in a document per se, when we talk about AI in our organization, we do talk about our values and we talk about that ethical framework and how we want to operate within this domain and space. But I do think it's at a level now with the pace that it's moving at that we need to all be operating according to a set of frameworks. And that's something we're going to take on organizationally, is to actually codify and document what that means for us. And I think that'll really help with, the organization and the people when they see, okay, this is exactly what we stand for in this domain. And it's written part of a formal document. I really do think that'll help assuage some of the fear.
Great advice. 値, I want to sort of finish up on the customer side of the equation with you. How do you, as a leader, and how are you coaching your leader clients to balance the pressures of rapid AI, kind of efficiency? So we want to implement this for that reason. But how do we do that in balance with preserving the customer's relationship and the trust between the customer and the organization and the tools that we're using?
So the way to think about this, and I'll talk about services businesses because that's where I tend to focus on. So let's look at legal or audit, tax advisory. We are in the trust business. People are coming to us with trust. So first thing you have to, if you're going to be using AI for any part of this, you have to be able to talk to your clients and say, we're going to use it, but any data you give us is going to be kept safe. Because that's one of the biggest fears that anybody has, that they're giving you confidential information that they don't want the rest of the world to know. And then if they say they don't want you to do that, you have to respect their wishes, because a lot of people are now starting to put that into any of the agreements that they have with their clients, saying we're going to be using AI for this. And so that the client has to say, yes, I'm okay with it. If they don't, then you should not be using it. Then when you're actually delivering on it, and I think this follows up to what Val said, if the machine is going to give you, the AI is going to give you what it's going to give you. At the end of the day, the human has to take responsibility, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's an auditor, it's a tax professional. A human has to look at the results and be like, is this okay? Is there something off? It's not got the year wrong. It's not saying 2025 when it's 2026. So I think this is becoming incredibly important, that the technology is an enabler. It's not the driver, and the human is still the one who's he or she is responsible. And they have to be the ones if they're the ones who are signing on it, they have to be able to say, I stand behind whatever the results that have come out of this. And if you're able to do that in a way, that's how you gain trust. And so that's where you almost need to codify it. So every contract you sign with your client, you have to be able to state that you and they have the option of opting out and saying, no, I don't want you to use AI. And if you're using it, you need to have your employees know that it's not that the AI is responsible for the results, the human still is. They are the ones who are going to sign on it, and whatever they do, they're responsible. So both sides need to know that, and that's how you build trust.
So kind of pulling together the leadership element, the team element, the customer element, thinking about all three of those things, I want to kind of go to each of you and ask you again for one tip, specifically sort of tuned towards the leadership, so the C-suite. What advice would you give them right now about dealing with AI, but pulling in that human centricity into how they're delivering, communicating, et cetera? How would you put those two pieces together? What is a piece of advice that you would give to a leader? So a leader wants to know, okay, I listened to this. What do I do now? I understand, human-centric is important, but how do I balance those two? So who's going to take it first?
Maybe I think sorry about that, Val. Look, I think we're in like a fog of war kind of moment at this point in time, where there is just enormous uncertainty and anxiety that people are feeling because we're being deluged with the hysteria mongers, quite frankly, who have an incentive because they have stock and ownership in some AI company to create as big a bubble as possible. For leadership to have a very clear voice, to have a point of view, and to articulate that very deliberately with the staff. So this is not something that you can be silent on in terms of your philosophical perspective, in terms of your strategic perspective on, what the space is, where it's headed, what's noise and what's not noise. I really think leadership should be deliberate about having vocal conversations with their organization about, clearing away some of that fog, because otherwise your employees are going to take it upon themselves to listen to the latest, doomsayer that's saying this is going to, cause the end of humanity. And that, I think that tone setting at the top, along with our values and how we're going to deploy this, to me is, I think, the biggest, while it's an abstraction and it's at a high level, I think that's probably the biggest advice that I can offer leadership.
Communication is everything, right? Communication is everything. And I do think that at times leaders sometimes get concerned about sharing too much information. And I often, I know there is a little bit of a balance with that, but I think often there are ways to take the communication to a level where you can make sure that both the team members and the customers understand what's really happening without putting you
also saying is, I'm sorry to cut you off, Jessica, is that it's tempting to get down to the tactical operational level of what you're doing within AI, but I think there is a need to go a lot up a level before you have that conversation to frame it for everybody. A really crisp framing on what is noise, what is real, what are the real impacts, and how are we going to approach it as an organization in terms of those things that are real and not real.
Great. Val?
Yeah, stories explain what it means and what people feel about it. So if you use customer stories, show AI working alongside people, not instead of them. Let employees tell these stories if you can. Nothing's better than a frontline worker explaining how a tool helped them serve a customer. That's more credible than any marketing message.
Nita, what you got?
So what I would say is that, and again, I bring it back to services, businesses, which are people driven. And the key that the leader has to communicate is that at the end of the day, we are in a human business. We are in and people are the most important asset. And any tool that we are giving you, any AI, etc., is enabling you to become better. It might take away all the mundane, repetitive tasks. And you are the one who's going to add value on top of that. And the more you kind of bring it back to that it's like the human is what matters. The tool is just helping you become more efficient. That's what's going to become important. And that's what I would suggest to any good leader. Don't get so caught up in the tool. It's just a tool. It's an enabler. It's not a driver. It's the
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Love that. So I have one last question. So we're going to wrap up on this last question. It's my favorite one of the night, though. So this is exciting for me. So again, to each of you, what does success look like for organizations that get this balance of AI and human centricity right? Where AI and human-centric leadership are aligned, what does success look like for those organizations? What does that mean?
Yeah, and maybe I don't want to be too cute about this.
I was going to pick on one of you guys, so I'm glad that you popped in.
I think there's a cycle that all these technologies go through, from when it's invented and it's very messy to kind of actually building it out into real infrastructure, to I think where we are now is a speculation bubble, and then there's a correction, and then finally it actually makes its way into real integration, into society. I think what success looks like ultimately is that we don't talk about coming email disruption anymore, because it's just such a fundamental part of our what we do. It's an everyday part of our reality. Same way we don't talk about the coming internet disruption. It's part of every single day reality. I do think AI is going to be baked into how we work going forward, and we won't talk about AI as this coming disruption. It'll just be an everyday part of how we deploy our solutions and how we execute our jobs and execute our tasks. So success, I think everyone's productivity is going to go up. I know that ever since I've started using AI tools, I'm able to do 5 times the amount of work So organizations become nimble, faster. We'll produce way more work. And I think as a society, that means productivity will rise. And so to me, we're not talking about AI anymore, but we're all producing way more efficient, much better work than we used to without AI.
Love it. Val, what you got?
Yeah, I think, if you want to, what's an organization that's successful using AI? It's where no one's choosing between being efficient and being human. Okay. Those two things are reinforcing each other because the systems were built that way from the beginning. It means customers who trust you more over time, not less, because when they're interacting with your AI, it's like the same same interaction as with your people. All right. And the same thing with the employees. They feel more capable, just like Isaiah said, more valued because technology got rid of the friction and left them the work that actually requires their judgment, creativity, and care, not the grunt work. All right. And for leaders, they can move faster with confidence because they've built the structures in place that keeps the organization honest with itself. And the capabilities have now grown exponentially. If employees, without being prompted, described AI as something that helps them do their job better, you've gotten partway there for sure. If organizations get this right, well, there's going to be a lot of difficult changes for some organizations out there, but they kept two things in tension: the pressure to move fast and the discipline to move thoughtfully. All right, and that's a leadership change, not a technology achievement. Yeah. So AI doesn't determine whether an organization becomes more human or less human. The people do that, and if you can work on it consistently, methodically, thoughtfully, you'll look back and see you've built something worth building.
Well said. Nita, any thoughts?
Yes. So what I would say is, first is absolutely correct. And I like what both Isaiah and Val said. The technology, we're not going to talk about it anymore. It's just going to be how we work. We're just going to be more efficient, do things better. So I think that's where a successful firm will be like. Nobody's talking about, like, when we look at our phones, we've got our iPhones. Who thinks about what's the technology behind it? We just use it. Or the internet. That's what it's going to become. And that's what ultimately that would be success. And then the focus continues to be, how do we serve our clients more effectively? And understand as their needs are changing, what any firm can be doing. And the more you're able to do that effectively, that's where it's going to be. And then the people who are working, the employees who are working. So it's going to be the client you're meeting their needs more effectively. And when you're actually from the employee perspective, that they actually feel much more connected to the firm, that they're treated more as humans, that they're not treated as like machines. Because sometimes that's what you find when this AI comes in, everybody's like, oh, you're replaceable by a machine. That they feel valued and they feel connected to the purpose that the firm is serving. So that becomes successful, and they're like taken care of, not just the technology, et cetera, that they have all of that, but as humans, that's how they're treated. And I think that's what our generation and the next generations are actually wanting to be with companies whose values align with theirs. To me, that's what the successful company would be. And the AI would just be, that's at the background. It's all there.
Well, the concept of value and the company value and really bringing that to the fore, you all have put that into this conversation over and over again today. So for me, that is the big takeaway, that we really need to be clear on what our company value is and make sure that we're living that value as we are communicating, changing, creating our boundaries around use of AI. I think that you guys gave some great advice with all of that. Also throwing out there that the Institute for Digital Transformation, who is sponsoring, oh, there we go. See, just like that, John knows exactly what I was about to say. We have an article that might be worth a read and on this very topic, and it's really about the partnership of AI becoming part of the team, and thinking of AI as a team member, as opposed to a thing over here that we've got to somehow fit into a slot somewhere in our organization. So we have about 5 minutes or so left. Any last words from anybody on all of this? If we're going to wrap all this together, any last?
Very exciting time. We're going to go through a lot of change. What we say today I think what we say today is going to stick, though, if we stick to these types of values and make sure that we're keeping humans in the loop here. But there's going to be all kinds of exceptions to the rule. What happened 3 years ago, what happened last month is different than it is today.
And I'll say we live in interesting times. Isn't there a Chinese proverb which said, may you live in interesting times? And we certainly are living there.
I thought it was an Irish proverb.
It should be, right?
Right.
So I didn't know an Irish one.
There
But
you
I
go.
think this is what we are in such an interesting time. And I think change is going to be the only constant. And that's what human beings, we have to get used to sort of being like, that's where we need to start getting more comfortable.
Yes, awesome.
I think capital markets are brutal, and I think it's going to take extraordinary leadership to inject humanity into how we navigate through this technological disruption.
Well, I want to, as we wrap up now, thank all of you for being a part of this discussion. Absolutely want to thank the audience for attending today. I hope you all got something wonderful out of this. Again, happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm assuming that you all, as 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗁𝗂, are going to do some sort of Irishy thing today. So you enjoy yourselves as you do that. My day is winding down. It's just about midnight for me. So I'm probably going to have to put my hat away, never to be worn again. I'll leave that here in Thailand. I don't think anybody needs to see that again, and get some sleep. Anyway, everybody on the panel, thank you. Have a wonderful day. To our audience, you all have a lovely St. Patrick's Day, and we will see you next time. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.